last Sunday, we kicked off our Thanksgiving series based on looking at two different stories in Scripture where Jesus says thank you or praise you, which is really another form of thanks, in particular to God. And the story we focused on this past week comes out of Matthew chapter 11, starting in verse 25 through verse 30. And we looked at this idea of a few different things, but in particular talking about a childlike faith versus someone who was what Scripture calls wise and well-learned, right? That the well-learned is looking through their own lens. They are trying to figure out and rely on themselves, being completely independent. Whereas a child in particular is dependent fully on the parent. A child is dependent fully on who is raising them, who feeds them, who keeps them safe. And Jesus says that is praising God, saying thank you for keeping really your salvation away from those who are wise and well-learned, and giving your salvation, revealing salvation to those who have childlike faith. But what's the point of this? Why is Jesus actually saying thank you here? It's because the only way to be able to have salvation is through humbly accepting the gift of Jesus' grace and mercy, the gift of that salvation through his sacrifice, through the death and the resurrection of Jesus. And he says in this passage, "Come you who are weary and heavy laden, who are burdened, and I will give you rest. My yoke is easy and my burden is light." And so Jesus, we see two things in this passage, that Jesus not only gives rest, but Jesus gives purpose. So that rest in particular is rest from being weary, from being burdened, feelings that all of us can understand and experience and relate to. And that purpose is that it's that the fact that Jesus isn't just asking us to take this rest and be done with it. No, he's asking us to take not only this rest, and through that rest, live out our purpose within him, right? He doesn't say in Scripture that my yoke is non-existent and my burden is weightless. He doesn't say that, right? There's action that has to be taken in a relationship with Jesus to live out your faith. And we talk about that all the time, but what does it look like for you to practically apply that in a different way in your life than maybe you're not doing so right now? And Jesus is saying, thank you for God setting it up this way. Setting it up in the fact that we have to rely on him. There is no other way. We cannot be good enough to be able to inherit the kingdom of heaven, to be able to accept salvation because of our actions. It's only through humility and accepting the gift that Jesus offers. And so can you say the same thing in your life? That you are relying so heavily on God, that you are saying thank you to him, that is the way that he set it up, that there was no other way. Because if we didn't have to rely on God for salvation, there would be no reason for Jesus. There would be no reason for what we do, what we believe, that none at all. We have to rely on him. And so a couple questions that I would love for you to think about this week as we try to dig deeper and practically apply this to our life, maybe in a new way. So first and foremost, between the comparison of the wise and well-learned versus the child and having childlike faith, which one do you best relate to? Be honest with yourself about that. How, maybe in certain instances in your life, do you model a childlike faith? But in particular, let's look at the ones where we look at ourselves as the wise and well-learned. Maybe not because we think we're smart, but because we're relying on our own wisdom and our own effort to be able to feel good enough as a believer. And then question number 2, what burden are you holding on to that you haven't been open and vulnerable with God enough to give it to him and to allow him to take that, so then you can take his yoke upon you?